Welcome to the Munro Review, where it's all about connecting, sharing, and valuing the arts in the Central San Joaquin Valley. I'm Donald Munro. Today is December 22nd, and we're here with a special edition of the show devoted to my top 20 cultural events of the year. As you can see, we're in a different space than the usual CMAC studio. We're actually up a few floors, but great artists always improvise. So we're gonna take it away. Now, the coverage of my top 20 list will take up most of the show, and we'll get to it in a moment. First, here's some of what I've been covering the past month on MunroReview.com. The most read story was about an eye-rolling controversy that erupted at Children's Musical Theater Works after several first-grade teachers got up during a school show performance of Oliver and walked their kids out. To make matters worse, a group of junior high school students from Clovis Unified were kept from seeing the show the next day. School officials cited violence, drinking, and thievery in Oliver as factors. After I wrote a sort of blistering story, it got picked up all over by the Bee, by the San Jose Mercury, by artsjournal.com, and finally, the Daily Mail, a London tabloid with millions of readers. What can you say? In other coverage, remember Kai, the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker? 10 years ago, he was another reason Fresno made the world map after he got picked up by a deranged driver who then hit a pedestrian, then tackled a bystander, whereupon Kai took a hatchet out of his backpack. It then turns out that Kai's story was more complicated. He was wanted for murder. If all this sounds like it was made for Netflix, well, then you're right. A documentary about the incident will debut on Netflix on January 10th. Now, let's get to our main event. My top 20 list has been around a long time. I've been doing a version of it since 2004 at the Fresno Bee. When I shifted over to the Munro Review, I kept the tradition going. And you know what that means? Next year will be the 20th anniversary of my top 20 list. Hey, producer Kyle, I think we should celebrate that milestone by taking the show on the road to Hawaii and announcing the list from the beach. Can we see if we can work that into the CMAC budget? But I digress. My top 20 list for 2022 was tough to put together, as it is every year. There were many outstanding performances, events, and trends to consider. That's why I have an honorable mention category, which you'll be able to read on MunroReview.com. It's also why I include a Reader's Choice category, which helps fill in some of the events that I didn't manage to get to. Though my list isn't in any particular order, there is always special significance to the first entry of any list. And that honor goes this year to Center Stage Clovis Community Theater's production of All Is Calm, which mesmerized audiences in November. Let's watch a clip of the show before we welcome the creative team and the actors. What a powerful show that was, and what a powerful moment. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Do you like the new studio? It's actually not new, but it's kind of improvised.
We love it.
It's a little chilly, but it's got a nice skyline view of
Yes,
Fresno,
it does.
and that's always nice. Well, let's do some introductions. So let's start with Susan.
I'm Susan Kaler, and I was lucky enough to be the director of all.
The director of All Is Calm. You've got,
Roger Bergman, and I was the vocal director for the show.
okay. And then we have two of the actors, Hunter.
I'm Hunter Oschliger, and I was a cast member in All Is Calm.
And you played a number of characters,
Yeah.
like all of the actors played a number of
Yes.
characters. And what was like one of your primary characters?
I'd say my biggest was Jack Swingy. I had a big monologue. He was talking to his dad, and it was kind of like a son talking to dad moment. So that
Okay.
was a fun role to portray.
Okay. And Darren, you kind of wear two hats on this production.
Yes. Darren Tharp, I was an actor in the production, and I also am the artistic director and board president for Center Stage Clovis.
Okay, okay. Now, for people who didn't get to see this show, and I actually feel sorry for them because it really was one of the highlights of the year. What can you tell me about like how the show came together, Darren? Like why did you pick this particular title, and what did you end up with?
Sure. Earlier in the year, I was in search for a title coming off of last year's production of Merry Christmas, George Bailey, of It's a Wonderful Life stage radio show of a message of hope. And we wanted to continue that message, coming out of the pandemic, all of us still. And I just was looking for something unique, different, fresh, something that we could challenge our local talent here outside of the norm of the normal shows that kind of repeat its cycle. And I was just searching and searching through hundreds of different scripts and looking through different of the royalty holders. And lo and behold, I came across this title called All Is Calm that I didn't know anything about. And I started to read it, and 2 a.m. in the morning, just was in tears watching the production of it. It was a local PBS production of it. And I knew then that this was it. This was the show that we had to do. And because just the message of it, of how these men, the extraordinary journey that they took and what it would mean to our community. So I knew I had to do it. We put it together and assembled an amazing team. Couldn't have asked for these two unbelievable directors to really challenge us actors on stage.
So Susan, Darren came to you and he said, "I've got this show. It has how many cast members?"
We had 14.
14.
Yes.
It's a cappella.
Yeah, yeah.
It's on a tiny little stage. Oh, and by the way, we're recreating World War I, and it's got to be like
And it's
battle,
all
like a
music,
battlefield, and it's
they're
all
moving,
music.
and they never left the stage ever.
And so, what did you say?
No.
I had been retired for about 7 years already at this point, and so I was a little bit out of practice. But Darren's a hard sell, and when he told me about the production, I said, "Okay, I will familiarize myself, and we'll meet up again over coffee." And I was just instantly drawn to it, just like Darren had said, because it was so different. It was so different, and I like a challenge in that respect. My parents took me to Europe when I was 10 years old for about a year. We camped all over Europe, and as a 10-year-old girl, I was struck by how many monuments and learning more about World War I. You hear a lot about World War II, but World War I and the trenches had always been a little fascinating, not in a positive way, but it just fascinated me. And so this was an incredible opportunity to research that more. We learned so much, just the different types of music that were being sung at the time, and what a challenge that would be, and how we could educate the guys on stage and the audience members. It was just a magnificent experience. It really was.
So, Roger, one of the key things about this show is that it's made up of music of the time.
Some of it, yeah.
Were you familiar with those World War I songs?
I'd heard of most of them, and So it was kind of interesting to kind of do that. And then what the writer of this show has done is taken other songs of the season, the holiday songs, and made these really incredible arrangements that would work well with an a cappella group. And I just have to say, I thought of this whole show production. You know, you guys have all this wonderful sense of the history and all this. The entire time, I'm just panicked. The
Yeah,
entire
well,
time, 'cause
I was too.
trying to learn this music, and it's all a cappella, which simply means there's no accompaniment, there's no background music, there's no instruments, anything. And it was all panic, it was all hard work, it was all struggling to get through and try to get this music learned and languages. And then when we hit, and this is all the way up till opening night. After opening night or on opening night, I watched this and was just mesmerized by the effect of what we had put together. It blindsided me. I had no idea that this had this kind of.
Yeah, I think we
impact.
all were. You know,
Yeah.
I think we all
Until
were
we
kind
saw
of
it.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
what happened? And it was absolutely somebody, and I don't remember who said it, probably you, that it was like capturing lightning in a bottle. Because the voices, the gentlemen that we were able to,
Yeah, it just hit
it
you.
was amazing.
Yeah. What's fascinating for me is any piece of theater that I see, whether it's Broadway, community theater, usually within 5 minutes, I can tell.
Right.
There's a chemistry there. There's a punch. There's a
Right.
power to it. So Hunter, they probably teach even less about World War I in school today than when I went to school. Had you been really familiar at all with the trenches and this idea of this kind of intractable conflict?
I didn't really do too well in history because I've always had struggled with learning things. But I just remembered we only had one little passage about the Christmas truce. So when I had been told about this show happening, Randy Colress messaged me on Instagram, and he told me about it, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds awesome! I'd like to learn more." And so throughout the process, I did a lot more research, and we were sent more material and interviews with the soldiers who are actually mentioned in the show, and it's really powerful.
And that was one of the things we got to do as a cast in our rehearsals. You know, it was almost every week somebody was doing some research on the show, and we'd get to share a little bit of history of, who that soldier was or what they were doing in there in that time or what chocolates they exchanged during that time frame. But it was definitely a learning experience.
And just to remind folks, again, who didn't see the show, this is about the Christmas truce. Who wants to tell me about that?
So this was
Yeah.
this was the first year of World War I in 1914, and these men were and Roger speaks really great to it how the music changes throughout the show. The come on and join part of the show where it's go up and join and get in the army, and they don't think they had a real grasp and understanding what that war meant and what they were going to see out on the field. And as the war graduates and they are not going home by Christmas, it really changes their atmosphere. And so the trench life changes. And so it was one song that changed it all, and it was Stille Nacht, Silent Night, that the Germans actually started. And when they heard that, and then they started to volley back and forth, and in our show, it was Silent Night, Stille Nacht, when you saw those two sides with our hands up and slowly raising down. It was just a pivotal moment because that's when it started, and the friendship endured, and history kind of wrote itself out because they couldn't have this happening on the middle of a battlefield. But these were true heroes, non-ranking men that found peace in the midst of a bloody war.
It must have been so hard for that first man
To
to
come
take
up.
that first
Yeah,
that first step.
Yeah.
total bravery.
I mean, for me, World War I, I've always actually been kind of terrified of it. I think it sounds like the most horrific example of human conflict we've ever come up with. And I won't even go to see the movie 1918. I hear it's an amazing movie done all in one shot, but I just don't think I could deal with it. Hunter, what was it like to kind of put yourself in the shoes of these young men?
That I feel like like for me out of anyone else in the cast, it was because I'm like the actual age that the soldiers wore at the time, so I was told a lot to like think like that because it takes so much bravery to have that happen, but a lot of them didn't have that choice that we have today. They were just they all thought it would be a picnic. They thought it would just be, oh, we're gonna go, come back for Christmas, we're done with the war, we beat the Germans. But no, they're down there. You have these young guys just dying left and right, and you get close to these soldiers you're in the trenches with, and you just see your friends dying. And so I would just, I became friends with all the guys in the cast. We all became a band of brothers. So it was like I was seeing my friends die. So it made it become a much more real experience. And so it's a very emotional trip throughout the show. So
Yeah, there was actually one of the monologues that Randall
Yes.
spoke about with his friend Joe passing away in front of him, and what that was like. And it was an incredible monologue that he did and performed, and it was very moving to hear that.
And I think that a lot of that impact of that show is based on the fact that it's not somebody who made up the script. It's
Yeah.
based on an actual
On the actual
event,
words.
Yeah, they are
and
the
it's
actual
based on
words.
actual guys. These guys were recreating a particular soldier that was there. And I think that, more than anything, connected them to this whole thing and to each other.
And
we
I
saw
would
that.
I would agree with you, but I'd also say that the vocals, that's really, they just had a weight and a presence. And I'm curious, Roger, so you had 14 voices. Did it split up into 14 parts at any point? Or-
No, close.
Close.
Well, I think we had 7 or 8 parts on a couple, on Silent Night. There was a couple of Debussy things. We had basically 2 first tenors. I think we had 4 second tenors. Remind me if this is right. 4 baritones and 4 basses, I think, right? And
And
it-
just
it ended up
like
being-
the power both at the top and the bottom.
Yeah,
You know, your
could
top
hear the-
voice, wow.
Yeah.
The
Brandon.
bottom voice, wow.
Yeah.
And that just like kind of set the stage.
And to
I
just
think.
keep going,
Right.
because it just kept rolling. I mean,
Right.
you know, you didn't have time to hardly turn around. And then the next time, you know, and everything was in little pieces. Like the dialogue was quite short, and then they were right into another song, or the songs would actually dovetail one right into the next. So to be singing that hard for 70 minutes,
Right.
that, you know, was really,
there was
really,
one
really
particular
powerful.
part of that Silent Night where you had to portray the fact that these guys were all getting out of the trenches for the first time and trying to sing together from different language groups. So it's written in the score for them to have one group of the guys singing in English, one in German, and one group in French. They're all singing at different times. They're not singing Silent Night all in the same point in the measure of the music. And they're not all singing in the same keys. So everything is just this cacophony of sound, but it's written that way. It's written to sound bad. But the overall effect, I think, once we kind of got it into our heads, and you should see my score. I've got writing all the arrows, and I'm just, okay, we got to get this. And once they got it, it just had this transcendent sort of feel to it that was like, even though it doesn't sound like it fits, all of a sudden it begins to morph and gel into silent. Everybody recognizes the song. It was the most incredible thing.
I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the production values, the
yeah.
lighting
Oh, yeah.
in particular was stunning, and it brought the whole production up, you know, just
Yeah.
to a different level, and that was Dan
Dan with Wow Productions.
with Dan Aldape with
Yeah.
It was
with
really
Wow
interesting
Productions.
when I talked to Dan, whom I've known for quite a while too. It was interesting because as soon as I sat down with him and I said, I don't want this to pinpoint any specific person, any specific place, really any specific time. Same thing when I talked to Ginger about
Yep.
the costumes.
Yep.
I said, it needs to be almost like Thornton Wilder's Our Town, where everybody can go, you know, and completely bond with that idea or that person. And so when we talked about lighting, when Hunter comes out of the fog in the beginning, I said, I want him to come out of time, you know,
Yeah.
the past into our lives, and the lighting too. I want that guy to be just every man, so that if anyone looked at that, that could be their, you know, great grandfather, that could be whoever. Didn't have to be a specific.
And Hunter, what was it like to be that the opening note of the show. Is that nerve-wracking?
Yeah, it was, but originally the only reason was because I was born with an ability called perfect pitch, where I can.
We thank him for that.
Basically, I can parrot any note or anything I hear, like exactly how it sounds. And so with notes, I'm basically like a human pitch pipe. So that's the only song in the show where one person starts it, and it starts the whole show. So I think they needed someone that could start the show in the right key. So
Day.
We didn't want to divulge that secret to the fact of how good we were at getting it on pitch.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
basically Hunter starting particular songs. So
And he had
it
the
was
baby
great.
face too.
Yeah.
And he needed the baby face to be the very first thing to say, look at the age of these.
Yeah.
And then a lot of willing suspension of disbelief there for the rest of the guys.
Yeah. Hunter, I saw you in 2 productions very close to each other. I saw you in, of course, this show, and then also Oliver, completely transformed. You played Bill Sykes, probably the scariest Bill Sykes I've ever seen.
thank you.
Which is, it just really impressed me. Your range, your emotional range. What was it like going from playing like babyface soldier to like a Dickens villain?
Oh, it was so so much different, especially because I only had about 2 weeks to memorize this new character, and then on my off night I was Noah Claypole, so I had to memorize multiple stuff. But it was a lot of fun to really just think about like how much different of a life that these 2 characters have had. Like Bill's been on the streets for a while, and then I had some help with some cast members that I talk about to help build my character. But it was really strange to go from being a soldier to killing my girlfriend on stage.
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the great joys of theater, right? Is you get to kind of dive into these other characters' lives for a little bit, and then you get the applause and then go home and go back to your to regular life. So speaking of theater, Darren, it looks like Center Stage is back. It is raring to go. What can you tell us about next year?
Yeah. We're currently in season selection right now. We've narrowed down to about 3 titles that we're taking a look at, and then comparing what venue to pair that with. Our normal venue is going to be down for some construction, and that's the Mercedes Edwards Theater. So we're looking to kind of just change that and mold a show to that. We're going to continue. I can tell you that we will continue with another new title, another title that's still going to stretch, all of us here, all the performers, and provide another great message to our community, continue to hit on the values of our community. Yeah.
Well, we got to get on to the rest of my top 20 list, but I just would like to thank each of you for bringing us this amazing bit of theater. One of the things I love about theater is that you can never quite replicate it. Those performances, we'll never have them again, in exactly that same way. And for those people, and there were a lot of people who did manage to see it, I think you gave them a real gift. So I really thank you.
Well, thank you for having us and writing about it. And you're right, we could never repeat this cast and this production team. It was a true gift to us afterwards. So.
And you know what else? It's fun to have someone on the show where I can say, where I've already seen the show and I can tell you how much I like it. Rather than it's usually, you're previewing it, you're saying it's going to be coming. But in this case, I get to do that. So I think that's really cool. And Hunter, you're actually going to sing for us after I finish the rest of my list. So I'm excited about that too. Well, great. As I say, he's going to sing a number from the show at the end of my list. For our second entry on the list, I have another special guest, reporter Doug Hoagland, who wrote about what is probably the biggest art story of the decade for Fresno in terms of long-term impact, Measure P. Thank you for being here, Doug.
Glad to be here.
Doug, you and I worked extensively on this story, and I so appreciate all of the hard work and the thought that you put into it. Measure P is really important. Can you tell us why? How is it going to impact the arts
Sure.
scene?
Can I say first, though, what a great editor you were to work with?
Well, I appreciate that
Well,
too.
it's the truth. Sure. So Measure P went before the Fresno voters in 2018. It was a proposal to add 3.8 cents of an increase to the sales tax in the city of Fresno, raise millions of dollars over a 30-year period, and it would benefit the parks and the arts and culture scene in Fresno.
So the arts gets 12%
12%.
of that money, and you might think, well, that doesn't sound like that much, but we're talking about millions of dollars a year.
Yes, I mean, in this fiscal year, there was $7 million available.
So your story was essentially about how does this money get given out, I guess.
Correct.
How does it get dispersed? And like so much of life, I guess, the devil really is in the details. How is it supposed to work? How are they supposed to give out this money?
Well, maybe the first thing to understand is that the Fresno City Council has the final authority to disperse the money. They make the final decision. But Measure P established a Citizens Advisory Committee or Commission, and that commission is called the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission. 9 members of the public appointed by the mayor, and their job is to have fiscal oversight and budget accountability over the process of awarding the money, both for parks, but also for the arts and culture programs.
All this sounds great. It's like an independent citizens commission. But those people only have, or that board only has the power really that the city council gives it.
Correct.
And what happened with, the start of this process?
Well, the process is just beginning. And if you're an optimist, as former Fresno Mayor Ashley Swearingen is, and she helped write Measure P, she says, and I think there's some validity to this, they're working out the relationship between the council and the commission. But one big red flag was the city's purchase of the Tower Theater in April. Price was $6.8 million. $4.4 million of that came from Measure P. The commission, the Citizens Advisory Commission, knew nothing about that. Again, they have fiscal oversight, budget accountability, and they didn't know about it until some of them read about it in the media, and they were blindsided. So I think that raised questions on some people's part, how is this relationship going to work?
And just to be clear, and it does get really complicated, you and I talked a lot about different
Yes.
pots of money. And so you have the pot that has the 12%, you have the pot that has the money for the parks. The Tower Theater, supposedly all that money for the purchase came from the general arts, or the general parks part of the pot. Is that correct?
Yes, and this is where it really gets confusing. They can't spend any of the 12% for the arts until the cultural arts plan is completed. That's in process right now. They took the $4.4 million from one of the buckets of money for the parks, and you might think, well, that has, a theater has nothing to do with a park, but the fine print says other things the money can go for other things, and that's what they did.
You did a lot of reporting on this story. One of the things that you did was you availed yourself of the CMAC coverage
Yes.
of the commission.
Very helpful.
What did you learn from sitting through all those meetings?
Well, as I said, they're very helpful. You really can, dive in and try to get an understanding of what's going on. So what did I glean from it? I think the commissioners are very sincere in wanting to do a good job. I think the staff from the Parks Department who are interacting with the commissioners in these meetings also want to do a good job, but the staff is caught between the commission, which has no power really, and the city council, which has all the power and also controls the budget for the Parks Department. So you have a bit of a conflict.
And just to be clear, we're talking about things that might happen that could be bad for a lot of this discussion. For example, it's like dealing in hypotheticals in terms of, let's say a politician decides that a performance that has a gay and lesbian theme shouldn't be paid for by city funds.
Correct.
That politician, that city councilman, could intercede and squawk about it and make a big deal. On the other hand, someone, a city councilman on the other political side, might object to a different kind of art. And so the idea behind the measure was we were going to try to take this out of the hands of the politicians and put it in the hands of this commission and give them the authority to divide up the money. Is that
I think,
a good way of stating that?
pardon me, I think that's the spirit of Measure P, and I think we'll see what happens when the first grant applications are processed and recommendations are made to the City Council by the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission, and the council then takes a look at what they're presented with, and they decide what to do with those recommendations.
A show like The Music Man or All Is Calm, those are going to get funded no problem, and they're very non-controversial, and I don't think anyone would have any issue with that. It's these other, the types of works that are more cutting edge, more provocative, more apt to make people angry. Those are the kinds of things that could turn into just like an eternal battle, depending on who you have sitting on the city council.
Correct, and I think there are some people who are concerned that the culture wars we see play out in other arenas could become a factor in the city council's deliberations.
Now, you made an effort to reach the city council members for this story. How did that go?
Yes, not well. So I reached out to 6 of the 7 city council members. Just a word of explanation, the 7th one, Tyler Maxwell, happens to be my representative. I've worked with him on some of neighborhood issues, and I just felt like it would be a conflict of interest to ask him. Of the other 6, I asked to talk about the purchase of the Tower Theater and the relationship with the commission. Gary Bredefeld and Nelson Esparza's offices got back to me and said they weren't available. They had other things they were working on. The other 4, I never heard anything back from.
And you and I discussed this. This is like the only arts website, basically,
Yes.
in Fresno, covering the biggest arts question probably of the decade. And they couldn't even be bothered to get back to you working on this extensive report. So I was a little disappointed in that. I know you were.
I was,
you were
and I
too.
did point out to them in my emails that it was for the Munro Review, which is the one media source in the community that really does go in depth to the arts and culture.
Well, I'm happy to say that your story got picked up by artsjournal.com. It's been read by a lot of people. And my hope for this coverage is not so much trying to point out wrongdoing, because there's been no wrongdoing committed
Correct.
yet, but to offer kind of a warning or just a notice that we're watching. You know, you can't give away $7 million a year and expect to not have to answer for it.
Yes, I think you're really right there. And Ashley Swearingen made that point to me in the interview, and that's in the article, that this is the time to be watching and asking questions because they're rolling this out now. And they need to have the public scrutiny, public input, and to take it seriously.
Yeah, it's taxpayer money, it's our money.
Correct.
And we deserve to know how that money is being used.
Yes.
Well, Doug, thank you so much again for your hard work on that story, for coming to be on the show. And you can read Doug's story. It's still prominently on the homepage of MunroReview.com. And I really encourage you to take a read. It's not a short story, but I think it's a really important one. If you're interested in the arts in Fresno, I think it'll be worthwhile for you. All right, well now, let's unveil the rest of my top 20 list. Now, I'll be writing more detail about each of these honorees on MunroReview.com. So for now, I'll just offer brief descriptions. So number 3, and this is a good segue, I think, the Tower Theater. All I have to do is say those 3 words, and it summons so many memories from the past year. Actually, it's been more than a year. A group of community activists protested against selling the iconic theater to Adventure Church. And you know what? They won. The city bought the theater, and it's going to be used for the arts. Number 4 on my list, Meg Clark singing A Change in Me from Beauty and the Beast, a Good Company Players production at Roger Rocca's Dinner Theater. Now, I've seen this show a lot of times, and this is a moment that just sparkled for me in an emotional way. Number 5, Selma Arts Center. Okay, I'm sort of cheating on this one. I couldn't decide between 3 wonderful productions in 2022. The SpongeBob musical, Pippin, and Oedipus El Rey. Each one was presented with depth, feeling, and the kind of acting that rattles your soul, which is what good theater should be. Number 6, Mark Standriff in A Man for All Seasons. What a powerful, incendiary show. And Standriff, playing Sir Thomas More, was unforgettable. This Good Company production at the Second Space Theater deserved a full house every night. Number 7, the Greater Fresno area welcomed a new theater company in 2022, and that's always something to be thankful for. The Madera Theater Project made a splash in a beautiful new facility at Matilda Torres High School, and it particularly impressed with 2 shows from its inaugural season, Harvest Moon and All My Sons. I look forward to many more drives to Madera. Number 8, our own Lee Herrick has to be on this list. The Fresno City College poet was recently named by Governor Newsom as California's Poet Laureate. As founder of Lit Hop and an extensively published poet, Herrick has always been an inspiration. Number 9, Yunchan Lim is the youngest pianist to ever win the prestigious Van Cliburn Award, and his visit to Fresno for keyboard concerts was a classical music highlight. Lim is a household name in South Korea, and people of Korean descent came from all over the country to attend this amazing concert. Number 10, Dance Nation was the first full-scale theater production from You Are Here Theater, and it was a doozy. Director Ruth Griffin made this beautifully written play about a group of young dancers at a national championship just really come alive. Number 11, people love the December concerts titled And Suddenly the Angels, performed by Coro Piccolo, one of the ensembles of the Fresno Community Chorus. Now, I do too, but my favorite concert of theirs this year was dedicated to the Norwegian composer Ola Jego and his Dark Night of the Soul and Luminous Night of the Soul. What an amazing choral experience. Number 12, the Van Gogh Experience, a big, big deal for the Fresno area simply because of the tens of thousands of people who attended. If even a fraction of them go on to support local artists and museums, that would be a grand thing. Number 13, Hamilton. Oh yeah, that little old show. Who needs Broadway when you have a Broadway quality tour stopping by for a few weeks in your city? Number 14, Keith Alessi brought his banjo to the Rogue Festival and completely wowed me with a gentle little show about surviving cancer and reveling in the healing power of music. For one night, we were all banjo players. Number 15, Arte Americas can celebrate 2022, what with a big new $7 million grant from the state and lots of attention, But the best part of the year was its stunning Boom Oaxaca exhibition. Number 16, In the Next Room, or The Vibrator play, was a stellar production from Shine Theater, and in particular, Brooke Aiello and Michael Peterson. Number 17, Electricidad is one of 2 plays by Luis Alfaro from the Otello trilogy on this list, the other being Oedipus El Rey at Selma Arts Center. For Electricidad, director Gina Sandy Diaz gave us a show that crackled with spirit and emotion. Number 18, Kenneth Froelich got to see and hear the Fresno Philharmonic give the premiere of his clarinet concerto titled Melt. It's not every day a composer tackles a topic like climate change, and it was very effective. Number 19, the Fresno Art Museum had some very fine exhibitions in 2022, and my favorite was the first-time retrospective of the painter Chester Arnold. Number 20, Manuel Munoz is a native of Dinuba, and even though he lives in Arizona now, he writes only about the valley because he knows it so well. His latest nationally acclaimed book of short stories is titled The Consequences. Remember, you can read more about my picks and link to the original stories I wrote about them on MunroReview.com. Plus, you can read about my readers' favorites as well. When we return, a performance from Hunter Oschlager from All Is Calm. And now, from the show All Is Calm, Hunter Oschlager is going to sing the song Will Ye Go to Flanders?
Will you go to Flanders, my Malio? Will you go to Flanders, my Malio? There we'll get wine and brandy and sack and sugar candy. Will you go to Flanders, my Malio?
Thank you so much, Hunter. That was gorgeous. Well, that wraps it up for this month's episode of the Munro Review on CMAC. Come over here, Roger, and I'll just get into a nice,
There we go.
cozy, because we're kind of a little bit cold, right? Be sure to keep up online at MunroReview.com for previews, giveaways, profiles, reviews, and more. A big thank you to our crew, and a thank you to all our guests. And for all of you, please keep exploring and supporting the local arts scene. We'll see you next time.